Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Mary Vic Aplaon. I am the Support Services Manager here at AGI. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, here is a little background on AGI. The Alzheimer Group is a charitable organization that supports families and individuals living with dementia. Our services include activities for people living with dementia, individual and family counseling, support groups, educational courses, and workshops. Lectures such as this one are made possible by the generous support of the Lassner Learning Center and the Lindsay Memorial Foundation. So before we begin, please note that while the chat feature is unavailable, there is a Q&A button or space for you to write your questions. You may write your questions at any time, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. So today, I am very honored to introduce to you Dr. Darla Fortune, Associate Professor in the Department of Applied Human Sciences at Concordia University. Her research focuses on practices of inclusion, particularly within community leisure spaces, working toward enhancing experiences of belonging for individuals who may be at risk of being stigmatized and excluded. Darla's recent work has focused on experiences of belonging for older adults in community spaces such as art hives, museums, and community centers. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I give you Dr. Darla Fortune.
Thanks so much for that. Appreciate it. And thanks for being here, everybody. I'm here to talk about one project in particular today, which is tied certainly to my my research and my interest in belonging for older adults in community spaces. Today, I'm going to be talking about primarily good treatment practices for older English-speaking adults in Quebec. So thanks again for being here to listen to this today. So first, before I get underway, I just wanted to introduce my members of my research team for this particular project. So I'm working very closely with a few other members here on the research team. First, Dr. Megan Joy, who's an associate professor in the Department of Political Science at Concordia University. Dr. Joy has expertise in place-based policy in the field of aging studies and political practice. And their work really focuses on aging in place and age-friendly cities. Also joining me on the research team is Sandra Smeal she's a research associate at Concordia University, as well as the coordinator of expertise in inclusive aging, diversity, health, and well-being at Caregiver. So she another co-investigator on the project. And then our community organization representative or partner is Erica Botner, who is the manager of programs for seniors at Community Health and Social Service Network, called most commonly referred to as CHSSN, where she coordinates a provincial senior wellness center initiative for English-speaking seniors across the province. So our overall overarching goal for this particular project was to promote active aging in Quebec through the identification of how senior centers contribute to good treatment. In French, that the term is bientraitance, of older adults, and how these centers might improve their practices, approaches, and procedures to contribute to active aging through good treatment. This is something that's not really been looked at closely in the English sector. So it is a term, as I mentioned, that's familiar to French-speaking older adults, and there's been some research done in that sense. But this is one of the first times that we're aware of that we're really looking at this concept for English-speaking older adults in particular. So hoping that that sheds some light on perhaps if there's any differences, certainly if there's similarities as well, but getting a better handle on what good treatment really looks like. Approaching this project, we've really considered good treatment to be sort of broadly defined as an approach that values the respect, rights and freedoms of older adults and prioritizes their overall well-being. But certainly we wanted to look at that and hear directly from older adults about, what that means to them and what does that look like? How would they define it? Things like that. So that's what I'm going to be talking a bit more about shortly. So the objectives of this particular project was to document the meaning and significance of good treatment of older adults, and we were looking primarily at older adults who are members of senior centers in the province, to identify good treatment practices and barriers to these practices within senior centers, and to develop and implement leading good treatment practices for senior centers based on the meanings and the practices we identified. So I should just, I'll mention the fourth one first, and then I'll talk a little bit more about that. Finally, to evaluate and subsequently update leading good treatment practices for senior centers. So I just wanted to mention these are objectives for our entire project, which is a 3-year project. We're only partway through. So today I'm really focusing on the meaning and significance of good treatment and identifying some practices that help with that, barrier certainly as well, that help with that within senior centers. We're not yet at the phase of our research to develop leading good treatment practices. That's kind of our next step, just to be clear on that. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have a project partner for this research, and that is CHSSN. I mentioned Erica Botner, who's our affiliated with us through her involvement with CHSSN and has been part of the project as well. So just a brief overview for those not familiar with CHSSN. It was founded in 2000 to support English-speaking communities in the province of Quebec and their efforts to redress health status inequalities and promote overall community vitality. So one area in particular that we're connected to for this project is the Senior Wellness Center initiative. And what senior wellness centers are, well, I mean, we envisioned looking at senior centers kind of broadly, but we are looking at senior wellness centers specifically, which are community-run programs that aim to maintain and improve the health and well-being of English-speaking seniors, increase access to knowledge and health and social services, and they're also intended to decrease social isolation through purposeful and informed programming. So they're run throughout the province of Quebec and really are there to promote overall health and well-being of English-speaking older adults. That's not to say that they're the type of spaces that welcome everybody, but so certainly you don't have to be only, it's primarily for English-speaking older adults, but again, welcoming of all sort of diversity in that sense. So just a little bit of background before I get into kind of what we're finding and what we've done so far on the project. And that is, as I mentioned, an overall purpose is to promote active aging. What do we mean by that? Well, we follow the World Health Organization's kind of active aging framework, which really emphasizes continued participation in social, economic, cultural, spiritual, and civic affairs. That's, sort of word for word what they refer to as active aging. It, sort of necessitates this continued participation of older adults in kind of all areas of community life. And certainly to do that, it sort of entails, addressing factors that might cause people to be, socially isolated or experience loneliness and not be so involved in their community life or the communities in which they live. The World Health Organization's active aging model seeks to convey kind of a more comprehensive message than other terms. A lot of us might be familiar with terms that have been used throughout the years, things like successful aging, healthy aging, productive aging. In this sense, active aging, it seeks to enable sort of the physical, social, and mental well-being of older adults, as well as, primarily being concerned with their participation in society. So that's what, it really focuses on. With senior centers in general, a lot of the research has supported that they are the types of spaces that can support active aging by, helping older adults remain healthy and live independently in their communities, by, providing a lot of health promoting activities and programs and things like that. So to support older adults, mental, health, social well-being, physical well-being through the programs and services that are offered. An important health enhancing aspect of these centers certainly is the reduction of social isolation. Certainly time and time again, socialization has been identified by older adults as being sort of one of the biggest or primary benefits that they derive from their participation in senior centers. And certainly a lot of research, some of my own, in fact, somewhat recent research has really suggested that senior centers can be really important and vital spaces for experiencing a sense of belonging for older adults in particular. So there is a strong connection here between, participation in senior centers and feeling or experiencing that sense of belonging. So when it comes to belonging, and tying this back to the whole project, the idea of good treatment is that, this idea, given that experiencing a sense of belonging really does entail being valued, being respected, its realization in senior centers is really, contingent upon and certainly tied to receiving good treatment or feeling like you're, the recipient of good treatment when you're in these types of spaces, and that you do feel valued and respected in that way. Good treatment is essential for ensuring that senior center environments are inclusive of diversity and supportive of older adults' desired levels of engagement and contribution in the way they want to be involved in these spaces. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now about how we did what we did for this project. And so far, the first phase of this, the methodology that we used was a World Cafe method. And really a World Cafe is kind of just an umbrella term for a conversational process where groups of people sit and discuss a topic among like very informal style, kind of set up like a cafe like environment. Often refreshments or lunch is served, and again sort of tries to promote this sort of relaxed atmosphere so that people feel comfortable sitting at a round table kind of thing and discussing topics that are sort of salient or of interest to the group. So along with some senior wellness centers throughout the province, we were in contact with, at this point, with 4 senior wellness centers who agreed to host a World Cafe at each space. And these were kind of spread out a little bit in the sense that we had one in more of a rural area of Quebec, one in kind of like just outside the city, in the suburbs of the city, and a couple that were held right here in Montreal, like in sort of the central area of Montreal. We had a total, so across the 4 senior wellness center World Cafes that were held, there were a total of 163 participants altogether at those, and that consisted primarily of older adults, but also staff, and to a lesser extent, a few family members or volunteers were welcome. They were all sort of welcome to be there, but ended up participating in these as well. So a little bit of breakdown of our participants. As I mentioned, we had 163 participate in the conversations. In addition to that, we had 135 of those participants completed kind of a demographic questionnaire, so we could get a sense of who was in the room, age ranges, ratio of men to women participants, that sort of thing. So just as a bit of a snapshot here, the majority of participants who filled out the questionnaire indicated they were between 70 and 90 years old. 85% of our participants were female. Not a great surprise there, I don't think, but it was observed as well. The participants around the table, certainly largely female, and staff as well at many of the senior wellness centers. English was the language that participants were most comfortable speaking. Often everybody's first language, which again, not a surprise in this environment, given that senior wellness centers are set up primarily to support English-speaking older adults. So that was that. So one of the first main discussion questions that we had at our World Cafe was really we put that question out, what does it mean to be treated well as an older person? we wanted just to kind of have a very broad statement like this. And sometimes we also follow, like, how would you define being treated well, that kind of idea. And I mean, probably won't surprise a lot of people, the data that we gathered, again, across all four discussions at all four World Cafes were fairly consistent and fairly similar information. And by and large, we heard that being respected, being heard, being appreciated, inclusion, those sorts of things characterized what it means to be treated well. So, again, this is a project that is focusing primarily on older adults and the experience of aging. But as you can probably see from some of these quotes on this particular slide, and the idea that respect and being heard, being appreciated, I think are universal characteristics that we all value, and cuts across age groups, and cuts across a lot of society in terms of that. So wasn't terribly surprising to find that out, that that at first glance, many of these characteristics do appear to not be related to age so much, but we'll get into that in a minute, that there are a few differences as well. But certainly we, as I said, we heard, things like, when I'm respected, it means I feel heard, it means I feel seen, it means people, speak to me kindly, in spaces in the community. I'm not ignored, I don't experience judgment, that kind of thing. There were a lot of conversations around the extent to which this is actually happening, and there were some differences there where society, in general, is believed to be more open and respectful of older adults, and in some cases we heard the opposite of that there are certainly differences that people experience as they age when it comes to younger generations. Treating them with respect, and again, going to places, visiting wherever, the grocery store or other spaces in the community, and feeling like you matter, or that you're seen, and being spoken to respectfully in those types of situations. Certainly there was another layer here that pertains specifically to English-speaking older adults, and feeling like, again, the experiences that we heard about being an English speaker and an older adult in Quebec was sort of a double challenge in many ways. They felt kind of invisible as an older adult, and then certainly another layer of that as an English-speaking older adult, that people, would speak down to them, or they weren't getting the service, that their questions answered in a respectful way, or having some challenges around that. In terms of what that means. So being treated well really, was when they felt like that they did matter, that their opinions mattered, that they were embraced, kind of this idea of being embraced with open arms. Now, a lot of people talked about having very nice relationships with, say, service providers in the community, where they might get a hug from a bus driver, or a really warm smile, or an embrace by someone who works at the grocery store, and how that was indicative of good treatment for them as well, rather than again, feeling that idea of experiencing judgment in the community. What was really interesting about this, though, as well, when coming back to the idea of aging, there were very sort of a dichotomy, I guess, in a sense, where a lot of older adults talked about wanting to be treated as an older adult, and a lot of older adults at these World Cafes also talked about not wanting to be treated as an older adult. And it was kind of interesting to note the difference of that, between the two sort of perspectives. First, being treated as an older adult for some meant being respected for one's age. So the fact that older adults have experience, have lived a while, have things to share, kind of thing, that mattered, and they wanted to be spoken to with formal terms, like being addressed by Mr. or Mrs., and being respected in that sense. Again, a lot of different participants spoke about the need for kind of special or designated services for older adults. So talked a lot about designated spaces, a line at the bank, a designated aisle at the grocery store, obviously, seating on the bus, which already does happen, but the idea that maybe it's not always used to its fullest, that people don't always necessarily get up as quickly as they should or could, and free up a space for an older adult on the bus, for example, and how there needs to be more of this in the community, and that there's the treatment of older adults, and appreciate some of the make some of these accommodations in terms of seating or benches, for long waits for services, and make sure there's proper seating and maybe an express or a lane, as I said, designated for older adults that, could make them feel more valued in that sense. And then conversely, we often heard not being treated as an older adult was important as well. So in the sense of not using labels that, they don't need to be reminded, or being called, a senior, and being reminded of that constantly in different areas of community life, wanting to be just treated as a regular citizen. So the same as when we were younger, they talked about, why should it be different now just because I'm a few years older, sort of thing. I want to be treated the same. And so this was really, this quote I have on here, we have white hair, but we're still there. So just being recognized, being acknowledged, the idea that age shouldn't matter, and you should be able to receive kind of a good amount of respect regardless of age, was really talked about a lot here as well. So with all of that in mind, the next discussion question that we had pertained specifically to the senior wellness centers that we were visiting, and that they, participants in our discussions spent a lot of time in. So we had asked, now that we've had this conversation about what it means to be treated well, kind of in a general sense, and in the community, what does being treated well as an older person look like at your senior wellness center? And I think hopefully, what we heard in that regard can cut across, not just senior centers, but I think the information that we gathered here can be used to inform kind of practices and the way, other spaces in the community could treat older adults as well. So I'll share what they said, and then discuss at the end here some implications that I think are important for practice. Certainly, good treatment practices are those that are, senior wellness centers, I guess, are considered to be spaces of good treatment that support active aging when older adults feel valued by receiving personalized approaches to care, when they experience welcoming and inclusive spaces, and when they can participate in a variety of interesting programs. And so, again, maybe not any real big shocks or surprises here, but I'm going to talk about each one of these a little bit more. And so first of all, the idea that feeling valued by receiving personalized approaches to care came across, and these are just some of many quotes that we had received during this discussion, but the idea that people, I feel cared for here, staff, always make you feel wanted. They always check on you. This was really, really important. And we heard time and time again that, they'll make, staff that make calls to check on us if you're missing time from a program, if you haven't been there in a few days or in a while, that there'll be follow-up to see if you're feeling okay, how you're doing. This idea that felt welcomed with open arms, and had that personalized kind of care and attention, that they take a very personal interest in knowing my needs and asking about me personally. That kind of idea really, really resonated with all of our participants that we spoke to. Also hugely important was the idea of staff asking for suggestions and listening to the suggestions and acting on those suggestions. So always wanting feedback, taking the feedback very seriously, and again, that's a quote here, they take us seriously. They're very sincere. Our questions are taken seriously and our input is valued. So knowing, again, knowing that their opinions matters, that they can make a difference in these spaces, and they're not just seen as, a recipient of service or programming, but they're kind of a member of the Senior Wellness Center, and they have an important role to play, was what we had heard, that and again, this idea that they accept us not only as an older person, but as a person, which again, I think speaks volumes. Quotes like that suggest that, the value that they feel might be at risk if they feel like they're being treated as an older adult, in that sense that there's that risk of being treated less than or less respectful than, which is not what they want at all. So the next theme for this was experiencing welcoming and inclusive spaces, and this was really an important factor for senior wellness centers. The participants talked a lot about how it was so important that these be spaces that are welcoming and open for everyone. They wanted to feel that way, that they're able to be with other participants across difference, and that diversity is valued. And that there's things like cost would not be considered prohibitive for participants to attend. So it was really important that things are provided free of charge, and that people could go to these spaces whether or not they could afford to be in a to be there otherwise. So having that be very either provided free of charge or very, very low cost kind of outings and things like that people could be part of. And the idea that it is an open door, that there's always a smile, that people know, they stress that we know we're welcomed here when we walk in and we're greeted, and people say hello, and open arms kind of policy, that it creates that welcoming space. Hospitality here was hugely important as well. And of course, we heard time and time again the idea that coffee and tea are provided, which makes it feel really welcoming. Often they talk about lunch being served as well, or certain different types of refreshments that kind of set the tone, or set a bit of a welcoming feeling or atmosphere, which was again hugely important. Being part of a group, when I come here, I feel like I'm part of something. I think that ties back into what I had said on the previous slide around when your opinion matters, when you have a voice, that you do feel like you're part of something. So that valuing of people in that sense, and an alleviation, I guess, of being experiencing loneliness. Many people talked about being part of something, and while at the senior wellness center, it's takes them away from without it I'd be quite lonely at home, or without it I wouldn't have much else to do in the community, kind of idea. So it feels great to be part of this space. Talking about, again, feeling important in the space was mattered as well. And importantly, because this study did focus on older adults whose first language is English, access to resources in English was hugely valued and important. Many people talked about that this is a place to be comfortable being yourself, and where you're comfortable and able to speak English, and how good that felt, that it was one of the few places where for many, particularly in some of the outlying areas where English isn't as prominently spoken in the community itself, but this was kind of a refuge in that sense, where they could go to the senior wellness center and know that they have resources available to them in English, and they're quite comfortable, speaking their first language, which mattered a lot too. Before I move on from this, I did just want to point out that it wasn't, a lot of what we heard was really great and really positive, of course. A couple of areas for sort of improvement around being an inclusive space. Threats to that certainly exist, and a couple of those are things like transportation being an issue. If there, some programs maybe happen in the evening and it's difficult to get there at night, for example, was mentioned a few times. The inaccessibility of spaces. So in a couple of situations, we heard about stairs at a center being particularly problematic for some individuals. There's one place we had heard about where snow removal was not done very effectively in the winter months, so they often had to close completely for a period of time because of that. So sometimes the space was less than ideal. And certainly we had heard there were a lot of conversations about whether or how welcoming these spaces might be to men. Now, we did have some male participants who you know, did also seem to value being part of the senior wellness centers. But when questions were asked from time to time, is there enough offered for men? The answer we heard sometimes was no, and that, you know, it was kind of seen as maybe a space more suitable, I guess, for female participants. So I think in that sense, more could be done to make the space also maybe more welcoming and attractive to male participants as well, to be part of it. They are part of it now, but just to, you know, certainly to a lesser extent there. So, and then the final theme around this was participating in a variety of interesting programs. So this was something that was really valued and connected to feeling, you know, that you're being treated well also, in that sense that there's so many, you know, things to do. People valued that, you know, now they have a reason to get up in the morning. They, you know, my week, you know, they would say things like, my weeks are packed now. I have so much to do. I went from, you know, maybe before joining the senior wellness center, not having much to fill their days, feeling a bit lonely, feeling a little bored certainly after time transition periods like retirement, things like that. But now having, you know, a full slate of activities to take part in, so much to do. There was really a variety of things mentioned, everything from, you know, trivia to board games to outings in the community to lunches and lectures and, you know, again, full slate of stuff happening, physical activities and things like that. So lots of opportunities. What seemed to be valued most, or at least mentioned most, were opportunities to learn. And I think, you know, for many participants, that was a signal that staff at senior wellness centers take them seriously enough to know that they are still able to learn, and that's an important aspect of you know, their lives, and that they're still able to contribute and they want to learn new things, and it made them feel valued to be part of that. So that was you know, really kind of prioritized. Now, also a number of participants talked about, even though there's health specific programming provided, or perhaps lectures around certain things like diabetes and things, to, you know, they were sort of mentioned as being valued and being attractive features of programs. But a lot of people really focused on, those are okay, but we're here to socialize. We want that time, you know, we don't want to detract from that time. So when there's lectures and things, it does kind of take away from our social time, from our space to be together with other people and excuse me, enjoy ourselves and you know, be part of that. So that was a kind of an interesting thing to hear as well. Certainly the idea of having choice and flexibility in the programs mattered, where, you know, it was said numerous times that you don't have to do what's being offered. You you know, can just be there in the space. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Or yeah, if you don't want to participate, you feel like you can come anyway and still be part of it and still socialize with others of your own age group. So that was an important finding as well. Yeah, kind of wrapping this up just in time because I'm probably going to lose my voice. I'm sorry.
It's the time of the year.
So I just wanted to talk for a few minutes about implications for practice here, and that, you know, based on everything that we heard, we found, you know, we find again what cuts across, and not just specific to senior wellness centers, but I think specific to community types of spaces in general, are that, you know, the importance of personalized approaches and what they involve, things like getting to know people, asking about their needs, noticing when people aren't there. Certainly that ties back, you know, in my experience with experiences of belonging. When people know they're missed in a space, they know they belong in the first place, and that's really important. Making time for, you know, having excuse me, having time for people, making time for them, and showing that each individual that they do matter. There's the idea that a welcoming environment is characterized by, you know, those warm gestures, so smiles, hospitality, open and inviting spaces. The programs that are valued most are often varied and often inherently social. I mean, certainly the variety does matter, and I think there's a need for a lot of different types of programs, but social still kind of reigns supreme, I think, here, and opportunities for social connection still seem to be among the most important aspect of programs, as well as opportunities to learn new things, to be involved in ways of one's choosing. Those kinds of things are really important here as well. And sorry, I have a runny nose and everything. Sorry. So on that note, a few points of caution, I suppose, is that a narrow focus on health-based and sort of physical activity, which might be the case when, again, coming back to the idea of promoting active aging, in some cases that can easily be prioritized as being active in the sense of being physically well, physically active, while important. If that's all that's being focused on, it might miss the mark on what else is needed, and everything else that they highlight it around that. And when programs are restrictive in any sense due to cost or inaccessibility, they might inadvertently exclude some older adults either altogether or just not make people feel as welcome. So the idea, as I mentioned, when programs are perceived to be geared only perhaps to women, or if it's a space that's perceived to be more for women than men, it might deter participation. And programs that follow a specific plan may sort of lack the flexibility that some older adults are seeking. So I think that's something to take into consideration when planning certain programs, that if it's a type of program that people can just jump into and out of, or be part of it without participating in it directly, those kinds of things really make a difference as well, as we heard. So all kind of important considerations, I think, for sure. So I believe that excuse me, was my last, yes, my last slide there. Just wanted to say again, thanks for listening to this and putting up with my my voice coming and going a little bit. I also included my contact information as well, in case anyone had follow-up questions for me after the fact, but hopefully there's some questions today as well.
Thank you very much, Darla. I think you and your team are really doing a very valuable research in terms of really breaking the stigma about aging and about what older adults are like. Because I know I have a client of my own, and she doesn't refer to herself as growing older, but she refers to herself as like getting more mature. She would refer to it as like her maturity. And I know that for her, she said it hasn't been easy. Like there are things that that she would feel like that she would be treated differently. And I think this shed light to some of the things that our older adults are still wanting to be recognized, and to have that recognition, and to have that sense of belonging.
That's it.
After all, they've done a lot, right, to bring us where we are now. So I have some questions for you that were being asked by our participants here. One of the questions they said is as if some of this work has been done in Francophone communities. How similar, different are your findings? Are there any similar studies that were made in the Francophone?
Well, that's actually, thank you for that question. It's an important question, but it's something that we're working on at the moment, just to see that. So I will have the answer, I hope, before too long. But yeah, that's, we know a little bit about the sorry, I can't speak today, bientraitance, in the sense that, again, there are similarities and overlaps with terms of like respect and choice and things like that, but we need to dig a little deeper to see just exactly how similar or what differences might be there from our findings to others.
I think there is a follow-up question from the same were responses, conversations different across different groups that you were there a significant difference or in?
Not a lot, no, which was, I guess, interesting to see, very telling that there were certainly a lot of commonalities or common things that we heard time and time again: the importance of respect in all four conversations, the importance of like those themes that came out, around personalized treatment, the want of learning and social programming and being valued in the space and things like that. There were some sort of maybe differences in terms of I had made mention about one of the senior wellness centers having some particular issues around not having snow removal, like that kind of stuff was unique to one particular setting. Some things around the community space itself, like in a rural area versus an area where there's more services, some differences there, but across, what we'd heard from the experience of good treatment specifically and how that plays out in the senior wellness centers, there were really a lot of commonalities there, mostly.
Okay. I myself, Darla, I'm really just like curious between you said your participants their first language is English. So
Yes.
were there any other cultural like what other cultural you said majority were first their first language is English, but are there other participants that are English is just their second language?
Yes, yeah, there were quite a few as well. So English was certainly the common language and the language that most people felt comfortable speaking. For the majority, it was the first language for sure. But in some cases, we did note a lot of sort of cultural differences in our groups, and some of our groups had a lot of participants who originated from the Caribbean, for example, and different parts of the world where so yeah, that like certainly being here now in Quebec, English is the language that they're most comfortable speaking versus English or French. But in that sense, there were a number of differences in cultural background differences like that.
It's because I was just like wondering, because when you mentioned about like the good treatment, and when some cultures, I guess they really value that they're being referred to as Mr. and Mrs.
Yes.
to someone who's just like they can call you on a first name basis. Because I think I myself coming from from Southeast Asia, from the Philippines, and coming in here, and then I was asked by my professor to just call them by their first name. That was like a little bit of a hard adjustment for me. So I was just like wondering if it continues to when you grow older and during as seniors, that like that value of being referred as a sign of respect, like Mr. and
Yes,
Mrs.
for sure.
It seemed to be like a sign of respect for some cultures. And that's why I was just like wondering how many of those are actually from this culture, and the difference on that. Because in my experience, in my culture, it's really important that you address an older adult as a sign of respect with Mr. or Mrs. or any kind of title. So yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
have two more questions.
Okay.
Are there any senior wellness center that discuss topics not related to senior wellness, example, world events, music, or history? Is that a part of your of the conversation or a topic of interest when you're running the program?
So I wasn't sure if the question was like pertaining to our conversations, like our World Cafe conversations, if we discuss these topics.
Apparently, if it's the senior wellness center,
Oh, I see.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, yes, the programming at senior wellness centers is as I mentioned, quite diverse in that they do a lot of different programs that focus on world events, things like that, different cultures and countries, and opportunities to learn about new cultures, that kind of idea we heard about as well. So I think a lot of that does happen,
Okay.
within the
Yeah.
senior wellness centers.
So
So it's not all focused on just senior wellness, like or health related,
oh yeah,
conversation.
yeah, because as you said in the end, right? Like I mean, it has to be well diverse because some you can easily miss the mark if you're just too focused on your, on health
Yes,
and
for
like
sure.
physical activity. So another question is that, is there any research on what makes spaces like this more appealing to men, or what makes them hesitant to participate? Have you, were you able to delve on that? Like what? Yeah.
Well, that's similar to, I think, the first question. That is something that is front and center on our list of things to do, because I mean, we weren't terribly surprised to find it, only because, having done research and, previous research with older adults and other types of spaces, it's been my experience that oftentimes my participants are more women than men participate in the
Mm-hmm.
spaces themselves and participate in the research as a result. So I've observed this before, and um, but it was very, very, very obvious in this research, across the board. And we are diving into that a little bit more now. We want to dig into the literature to see what it is about community spaces like these in general, that might, I know there are some that are specific to men. Like I've heard a little bit about men's sheds, for example, is one example that I'm familiar with, but I'm sure there are others too. But when, I think, I mean, the loose answer I want to say, or just anecdotally, I guess, is that I think the whole socialization piece is something that kind of women maybe prioritize more than men do, probably
Mm-hmm.
throughout our lives even, but certainly later in life that becomes a big priority. But I don't think that's the whole story, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
So men might find it elsewhere, certainly. And I know things like the men's sheds seem to be particularly appealing. I know some of the research around that suggests that it's kind of a work-like environment, like they're still doing stuff that might
Mm-hmm.
resemble what they did when they were, still working, for example. So that might be an important aspect of their involvement, is that they're productive and have a work-like function, whereas women might tend to more so gravitate towards the social connections that they can make in such spaces. We will be, yeah, but I don't want to say too much about it, because I might not even be. Those are just a couple of assumptions I'm making right now, I think, and I want to dig a little further on that, and before I have something meaningful to say on
But I think you're on the right track. I'm thinking of exactly the same thing.
that.
why
Yeah.
why but one thing that because we used to have our program, AGI, we used to have what do you call this, men in the kitchen.
Okay.
Yes, and it was actually interesting because, like, as they cook, they tend to like talk more about it. But the program only lasted for a couple of years. And but it was really like, for those who participated, actually, it turned out to be like really, really important for them in terms of their support, because they're all caregivers for their wives who is having the diagnosis of dementia and everything. So that's one way of them like getting in touch and getting connected, because I think for us women it's just easy to talk about our feelings, right, while we're going through. Like for
Yes.
men it has to be, I guess, task, they can discuss over it. It's not um their main, how do you say this, their main agenda.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. So
For sure.
anyway, so Darla, I think that's it. I'm checking all the questions.
Okay.
Thank you very much for this lovely, lovely information that you have imparted to us. I think it's really important to, I really have my heart is really big. I have a big space for our seniors and for our, elderlies. It's because they've done so much for us. That's why we're enjoying what we are, where we are right now, because they paved the
Yes.
way for us. So that's how I feel. So and I think this is a very, very important information to be, for everyone to know and to learn on how we can actually honor and continue to give space for our elderlies and for our seniors. And again, thank you very much and have a good rest of the week. And for the rest, if you have any more questions, please feel free to email it to us. And Darla, if we have, we'll send it to you. And
Yes, please.
maybe you could yeah. Anyway, thank
Okay.
you very much. On behalf of AGI, have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.